Self-study of clinical looking glass, Tutorial 5. The diabetic cohort with repeat hemoglobin A1c in 180 to 365 days after the first. For a deeper and amusing understanding of how to use cohorts to analyze healthcare quality, read Riddles in Accountable Healthcare by Eran Bellin, available on Amazon and in paperback and Kindle. In our previous tutorial, we built a diabetic cohort. Now we're going to modify this diabetic cohort to include a second condition. The second condition is that there was a repeat hemoglobin A1c done within 180 to 365 days after the original one. This example demonstrates the temporal power of clinical looking glass and is a major building block for your use of the tool. First, let's get into Event Canvas, and let's right-click on the cohort itself and choose Edit. Edit now opens up the Event Canvas. With the Event Canvas open, we realize there is one condition line: diabetes, earliest hemoglobin A1c greater than or equal to 9.5, when in June of 02 to June of 03, age 21 to 65, and we want to add another condition line. To do that, we hover over the index event line. We right-click, and we know two options. There's Add, where you add another line, another condition line, or Edit. In this case, we will add, and we will use the Within command. As you see on the event canvas, we have a second condition line with a new symbol in front of it, which means Within. It's in red because we haven't yet specified the conditions in the GUI that is at the bottom of the event canvas image. Let's name this condition line Repeat Hemoglobin A1c. We're going to look for the earliest, the first time it was repeated, and we're going to define the event that we're looking for in terms of repetition. The event is going to be called Repeat Hemoglobin A1c. So the event type, as we did before, is going to be a lab test. We have to specify in the definition by hovering and right-clicking a condition, and that condition is going to define the lab test type as equal to hemoglobin A1c. We type the first few letters, and then we can just scroll down to the right one. Now, using this GUI, we're going to update and close, and it's going to populate this undefined condition. And you see the lab test type is equal to hemoglobin A1c. We are not further specifying any other condition. We're not requiring a specific lab value. If we did, we would be hovering here and adding another condition line. All we want is we want to have a lab test repeated hemoglobin A1c. Now we're going to update and close, and that's going to populate over here the GUI's object called the new event definition. So update and close, and notice how this has now been populated. We have to determine the time period where we want to find the repeat hemoglobin A1c. We want the repeat to be somewhere between 180 days to 365 days after the original diabetic event. That is, we want to make sure that at least 180 days have passed since the original hemoglobin A1c, and no more than 365 days have elapsed. Now we're ready to update and close, and this will then populate this condition line. So now we have two condition lines. We have diabetes, earliest hemoglobin A1c, and a repeat hemoglobin A1c within 180 to 365 days after the diabetes event. This is really powerful. You're able to control what follows what. We don't look at any hemoglobin A1c before day 180, and we're basically asking, do we have evidence that these patients are being followed up in an appropriate fashion? Notice, the index event line is pointing to the first diabetes. So this is important if we want the index date to be from the date of the original diagnosis. Because I know that later I'm going to want to be doing evaluations that begin at the repeat study, I will modify the index event line by editing it and saying I want the earliest repeat hemoglobin A1c. Update and close. Now you see earliest repeat hemoglobin A1c. And what this will now do is it will build a cohort of patients who have the original diabetes requirement and have a repeat hemoglobin A1c within 180 to 365 days. And the members of this cohort will have their index date drawn from the date of the repeat hemoglobin A1c. This is extremely important, so pay close attention. This cohort criteria defines the patients who are eligible. That is, they had diabetes originally by our original conditions, and they had a repeat hemoglobin A1c in the time frame we specify. But it is the index event line that tells you which of these lines is providing the index date time, which is going to be critical in our future analyses. Now let's build the cohort. If you recall, the original cohort had something on the order of 3,130 patients. Now we're going to find the number of patients who met both criteria, that were not only originally diagnosed, but are actually seen in follow-up. For that, you see only 1821. So we have lost, and this is a decade ago, 40% of our patients were not seen in follow-up 6 months to a year after their original hemoglobin A1c. It gives you a notion of why it's so important to have a cohort model in terms of looking for outcome, why it's important to look for not just those who show up, but those who are part of the cohort and don't show up. Because when you use a cohort model, you recognize that 40% of your patients were gone, and now you could actually make a cohort of those that were gone and try to follow them up and see what you can do to get them back into treatment.